So, do you pay your representative and senators salaries? The answer is yes, you do. Do they work for you? No, they don't work for you. Do they represent you? Yes, they represent you. There's a difference in all of that. And because of what's going on today, where you have major crowds screaming at people during town hall meetings, if you can get them to attend, and if they don't attend, do you have any rights relative to how and what should happen to that representative, whether it's a congressperson or a senator? These are some interesting questions. So let's talk about those for a minute. Hi, I'm Vic Vogel. In this particular segment, it's under the podcast Interpersonal Communication Leadership Course podcast. And I put it there because we're talking about interpersonal communication. And we're talking about our relationship with others. Now, when I say interpersonal communication, I mean interpersonal has to do with the relationship you have with others, and communication has to do with the process whereby you have that relationship with others in terms of how you communicate. But when I look at what's going on today and all these particular town hall meetings, there's some interesting dynamics that came to mind because I've been a leader for over 45 years and I've been researching. Then I retired, and then so I've been retired for about 18 years. But of those 18 years, the last 6 years, I've been researching why leaders have a problem with their satisfaction levels, and it comes down to how they interact with their people and some of the dynamics associated with those relationships. So let's take a look at a situation where you are hired by your boss. So your boss is paying you wages. And given that hiring process and given those rules associated with that company or business that hires you, they have certain legitimate rights as a leader. In other words, they have control over you as a leader, and those rights extend to the point where they could fire you for not performing your job well. They could fire you for just about anything that isn't violating the laws of employment or discrimination laws. And we call that legitimate power. In other words, they own the company, legitimately, they are your leader. They have the right to ask you to do what they want you to do for the money they pay you. And if you don't, they have the right to terminate you or suspend you or whatever is necessary in terms of getting you to do the right thing. Or if you can't or won't do the right thing, then they have the right to fire you. That's called legitimate power. Sometimes it's used coercively. In other words, people can use that power to threaten you. They can say, hey, look, I'm going to withhold your salary increase if you don't do what I ask you to do. Or they might also say something along the lines of, I'm going to fire you because or they start using coercion. In other words, they cut your hours, they give you bad shifts, they do those kinds of things, or and they threaten you that if you don't do something the way they ask it, or you might have to keep a secret about them that you know, they could fire you for that. and legitimately they can fire you. Now you have some recourses in the courts if you have a discrimination or an unfair employment law that they may have broken. You have some recourse in courts. Otherwise, you have no recourse. You're just fired. Uh, so the boss subordinate relationship is one of pretty much a significant control on the leadership or boss's side of the house. And that's why I spend a lot of time teaching bosses that that doesn't get you near the performance than if you build a positive, trusting relationship with your employees. Because employees do have one right, they can quit and go to another company. Okay? So that's the power they have over you. Now, if you put together a union and everybody quits to the point where it may stop the company's business, then that's a basic power the employer, the workforce as a whole together has over a company. And that's why companies fight so hard to keep unions out. They don't want employees having that kind of authority over them. But it is a real power base that they can use against, which is a coercive power base in some ways. The better way is to have a great relationship, and that's what I teach when I teach interpersonal communication leadership. Uh, I teach you what communication processes are best used to handle certain situations. Like what we're dealing with now, for example, in Congress is difficult discussions. How do we have these difficult discussions effectively? And it doesn't appear we're having them. It appears we're having some impact, but not the impact we should be having on them, on our representatives, both congresspersons or senators. So let's take a look at that relationship. Now, how does a congressperson or a senator get into position? They run for office. They tell you who they are. They tell you what they're going to do. They tell you they're going to represent you and take care of your general welfare. Okay? And you listen to them and you may believe them. That most of our problem we have is a population, or what I call the people in America, is we don't take the time to validate, or we don't have the skill sets to be able to assess whether what we're hearing from this very charismatic, smooth talking person, whether they're going to deliver what they say. So how does this impact you? So you conduct your election, and the person with the most votes, okay, generally speaking, there's of course the electoral system, but it's generally based around most votes. That's generally what it amounts to. So let's keep it at that level so that we can talk about communication. Uh, so you're electing somebody because you believe what they told you, that they're going to go in there and they're going to work for you and they're going to make things happen. For example, if they said they were going to reduce prices and help you and help pass laws that will help you, take care of your family better, reduce your cost of living, whether that's through food or health care or whatever it is, guarantee you some sense of security in your work and jobs and availability, and that comes through the economy and other things that they do in their role as congresspersons or senators. So that's where it begins, and you do that. That's also where the employment between an employer and an employee. The employer interviews the employee tells them their skill sets, and the employer, with some background work also, but checks out whether what they are, who they are, and they have done what they've said they've done to some extent. they trust the employee and they hire the employee and they start a training process to bring the employee on board, enculturate them, and teach them skills they need to do their job well. And the vast majority of the time that works well in corporations, okay? Now, when you're hiring or placing or voting, in other words, when you vote for somebody, you're basically hiring them to assume that position. You're hearing what they have to say. Now, the problem is the vast majority of people uh, don't have the skill set, don't have the resources, or just really are not competent in doing background checks on their representatives and going through their history to make sure, that they are and they have done what they said they've done. You don't find little glitches like they've been charged with fraud or something like that, or run into legal cases, even if they won the case, whether that's happened or not. That they are who they say they are. What you're doing is you're taking media, mass media, word on this. Now, maybe you attended one or two events where they sat down and you've listened to in a town hall and you listened to people ask questions. You liked the way they responded to the question. But the fact is, they could lie to you straight to your face and tell you they're going to do that, or this is how they think. Okay, there is always that possibility. There's a possibility with an employee you hire as an employer. There's a possibility with that congressperson or senator that you're putting into place. Okay, so then voting time comes, and the vast majority of people elect this representative into office, whether it's congressperson or senator. And that House and that Senate are the most significant representation of the people. So the people we put in there should be dedicated pretty much to taking care of the people at home. That's what they say they're going to do. That's what they say they're going to do. So how would that work? So how would that make you feel? So generally speaking, if something doesn't go right with that person, you don't like what they're doing, your first reaction is, look, buddy, I'm paying your salary. And the fact is, you are paying their salary with your taxes. You and everybody else in the United States of America, which is one of the misnomers that people have about paying the salary. They think they're paying their salary just out of their district. And in some cases, you think you are paying that salary directly. And the fact is that salary comes from all the taxes collected in the United States, and it's allotted or allocated based on Congress's how much they're going to pay each congressman and what benefits they get. But it comes from the whole United States of America. Okay? So now let's assume that this person goes into office and all of a sudden they are not representing what you believe they should be representative. Or, for example, they told you we're going to reduce costs. When we get in office, we're going to pass bills that reduce costs. We're going to pass bills that help improve your health care. We're going to pass bills that make you feel more safe and secure on the streets. We're going to pass all those bills. And suppose they pass none of those bills. Okay? Or, as it is now, promises were made that we're going to run the government a certain way. Basically, as you elected them, you felt they were going to run it the way as a democracy with the republics and the states, sort of a combination of those two things. And we're going to run it pretty much like we were running it, but we're going to change some things based on what you felt was needed to change. We're going to lower the cost. We're going to lower inflation. The first 30 days or so we're in office, we're going to pass some bills and we're going to do some things that lower inflation. We're going to um, uh, work on education. We're going to work on how to balance the budget and uh, things like that, the kinds of things you're required to do in your life that the government hasn't been doing. So all of those things appeal to you, and you feel like this person's going to go do that. You elect them, they go into office, then you get a president who becomes a dictator. What happens is your representatives are not passing any bills that they said they were going to pass. Primarily, it might be because they were blocked by the other party. There's such a narrow margin in both that, for example, the House and the Senate, that either party might be able to block what the other party wants to have happen. So you're kind of at a stalemate. No bills are being passed along the things that were important to you, like reducing inflation or taking the cost of health care down or providing some sort of the benefit for childcare or the things that affect your daily life, the lowering of gas prices, whatever that might be. Okay? That's not happening in Congress. That person you put in, that congressperson or that senator or the combination of both of them you elected, really aren't passing the bills. What's happening is you have a president who you most likely voted for also, or maybe you did or didn't, but if you happen to be a party, you did. So you were hoping that combination of the president, the House, and the Senate would allow the bills to be passed. Because what happens is Congress writes the laws and changes the laws and the bills that makes things happen. The president signs those that he agrees with them, and that he will then have his executive office efficiently run all of the executive government, all the government in an efficient and effective manner that will get those laws done that your Congress representatives have passed. And of course, if there's a question as to whether they're legal or not, then the judicial system will weigh in. But that's how the government's supposed to work and normally has worked for 249 years. But if you get somebody, we're finding ourselves where we have somebody who isn't ethical and moral, and they're in position for gaining power for themselves, and that is a president. A president who has some authorities to write executive orders and take other actions that can determine how things are going to impact you. In this case, we have a president who is, or a Congress that is not passing bills that are impacting you in a significant way for the major things that you want, like lower housing and lower food costs and gas and those things. Those aren't being passed. Those bills are not being put through Congress and passed by both houses, signed by the president, and executed. So what happens is the president is deciding that they're going to control everything through their office. Now, the dilemma here is you have 400 and some people in Congress, 200 and some people in the Senate. That's around 600 people that the people elected to run, to make the laws and that the country should live by. Uh, we don't have that many people who voted for the president in that much of a significant way. So when people say they have a mandate, they really don't have a mandate. For example, this current president only won by 1.5%. So if you took Kamala Harris votes and you took all the people who didn't vote and you even took 50% of those and added them to Kamala Harris, the likelihood is there is no mandate for the president to do anything. There are mandates for Congress to do something, but they're just not doing them. Okay. So now let's get back to so we have a president who is writing orders, and he has a certain element of power in that he has somebody working for him, or he has a lot of people working for him that have a lot of money, and those people are the people who pump all of the money into the elections for the congressperson and the senator in your area. They pump in lots of money to kind of determine who we will elect, who we think you should consider putting in position. That's one thing to keep in mind. There are people who are kind of defining who they think you ought to elect and hire and put in there, and you are putting them in there because you think because they've made a lot of money, they've run a lot of maybe they have large corporations, they have a lot of people who have been really successful in corporations and business backing these people, that these people are the people who are right for you and they're going to do what you say. The reality is they're going to do more what that person who's pumping the money into them is saying. And all the ads, all the commercials, all the TV stuff you see is focused around that. You as a person don't have that same authority that that company, you don't have the same resources that company has who hires you to check into that person whom these people with a lot of money are floating out there are as potential candidates. And so you don't get an accurate background check on them. You don't get a deep dive into them until supposedly the FBI does a background investigation saying they're qualified to run, assuming that's not blocked by the people who have control over the FBI, which is the executive office, the president of the United States. So that president can start, through his executive orders, can start creating a lot of things that block what would normally be your rights to understand things about people. And so you're getting what that president wants. And what happens is those congresspersons and those, which are your House person, House of Representative, congressperson, and your senator, they begin to see that the people who have control over who goes into Congress is not you, the people. It's the individuals who have the money that can flood the market for television that impacts you. So that's what's going on here. So now you have a congressperson and a senator who are not providing you what you said you wanted from them, and that's frustrating. It's making you angry, and you want to have town hall to discuss that. Well, you have the town hall, they tell you what they're going to do, and you say, that's not what we want you to do. We want you to go back and do that. They go back and they don't do it, and you see they don't do it. In fact, what you have now is someone who is more dedicated to that president of the United States, who did not elect those individuals into office. Contrary to what, say, a Donald Trump thinks, that if he won the election, the reason all these other congresspersons and senators were elected was because he won the election. Therefore, they should be accountable to him, not you, the person who elected him. So if there's a variance between what you think you want those congresspersons and senators to do and what the president wants them to do, they believe, most of one party now, and actually probably the other party would be just as strongly committed to their side, they believe what that president is all about is what we need to be concerned about, because that's where the money is cycled in, and where when you allow money to drive the election, the more money you have, the more those people in Congress and the Senate are going to be focused on satisfying who controls that money. You do not control that money. In fact, we have one person put more money into an election than just about all of the other people put together. I mean, just a massive amount of money. With Elon Musk this time, $250 million. He had the right to do that under law. Now, Congress could pass a law to stop that and don't allow anybody, say, to contribute, corporations or anybody, to contribute over $1,000 into an election. Yeah, that could happen, but it won't happen. The president currently, and most of the oligarchies that support the president and these representatives that they use their money to place in front of you, that you look at and say, looks good. Those people don't want those laws. So they're going to, so if you said to your Congress, I want you to pass a law saying no one entity, whether it's a person or a company or anything else, can contribute more than $1,000 to any candidate. If that's a law you wanted to get money out of your elections, you're most likely, if that law is not passed, then you would be saying that your House of Representative person, your congressional person, and your senator are not performing the job you wanted them to do, that you elected them to do. You tend to think you hired them to do it, but you elected them to do it. And they're saying, no, we're not going to do it because that ruffled the president's feathers, and it ruffled some of these big financial donors. They wouldn't be happy if we passed that law. So we know the vast majority of your people want that, but we're not going to pass it. And you go, well, wait a minute. You represent me, and the vast majority of me, not just these few people who have a lot of money. And you go, nah, well, yes and no. You elected us, and yeah, and 2 years from now or 4 years from now, whatever the election cycle is that they're in, whether it's a senator or congressional person, yeah, there's not much you can do to take me out of this office. In other words, you're not my boss after all. The people who control what goes on here in Washington, the money, those people are the people I want to listen to more, because they can put a lot of money and say, if I don't do what they want to do, then I can just spend a lot of money and put another person in front of all the people in whatever state or county you're in or precinct you're in. We can spend a lot of money and they're putting somebody else in that. So the threat to that person, that congressperson or that senator, is, from the oligarch standpoint, we'll primary you. In other words, we'll spend a lot of money on somebody else besides you if you don't pay attention to what we're telling you we want passed in bills. And that's what happens. And then you're hurt by that. In some cases, you're literally hurt by that. We're feeling that right now. We're feeling inflation isn't going away, and our democracy is a threat, and this is what those people want. They want less regulation so that they can gain more, and they have more, and you have less power to keep them from gaining that. And the way that works is those oligarchs run the companies that people work for. Therefore, the fewer restrictions they have when it comes to you working for them, the better they are at making things happen in favor of them. And the less likely you are to reap the same kind of benefits that they have for doing the work, for basically doing the work. In other words, if everybody walked out of every company today, our economy would just fail and all oligarchs would go away. We're seeing that a little bit with Tesla right now. You know, people are, this is one way people have, basically the only way that people have of responding to representatives, congressional representatives, and the oligarchs that support them, and that is to basically put the fear of God into those people. And that's what's happening. We're seeing Tesla, we're seeing Elon Musk, for example, lose half of his basic wealth in just a few weeks. Half of it. And now he gained a whole bunch of it simply by supporting Trump, but he lost all of that or almost all of that, basically, by people boycotting and actually illegally, which we don't support. That's not one way but the boycotts themselves which are legal. They're having an impact. People are selling their Teslas. They're not buying Teslas. So what's happened is Elon's being impacted by that. Now, what he is saying, and it is true, that's impacting a lot of Tesla people too, the everyday people like you. You know, if their stock goes down and it keeps diving, then they're going to fire a whole bunch of people in Tesla. Now, maybe that's the pain we have to put up with as a workforce, as a people out here, relative to controlling. So you really don't have any power. So your boss over you, if you're employed, has legitimate power authorized to him through employment contracts, etc., to hire and fire and dictate what you do. You, who have voted persons in, it's not the same. You don't have any legitimate power to tell that congressperson to pass a specific law or not. And if they don't pass that law, you don't have you have basically no powers to eliminate. You can't impeach them. They're not impeachable. You can't fire them because they work for the United States government. So in essence, all people in the country are employing this person. So when they go there to represent you, they also take an oath to represent everyone else in the country. So it's not just you they're representing also everybody else. Supposedly, they should be. That's what keeps a certain group of people from firing them, so to speak. There's no impeachment, there's no firing. There is literally no legal recourse you have to say to that person, we don't like what you're doing a bad job, we want to take you out and put somebody else in there. You don't have that authority as the people of the United States, even though your taxes are going in there. They pay part of this. Part of your taxes pay part of their salary is the way to think about it. Even everybody in the United States who voted could say, or even if they didn't vote, could say, we don't like what you're doing, get out. There's no legal recourse for any citizen of the United States to eliminate a congressperson or a senator. So why is it important you take the time to understand and get involved in your federal government elections? This is one of those reasons. And so now I want to just briefly move over to these town hall meetings. So now what's happening is we have a, as if you think of yourself as someone who put that person in a position, they are not doing what you want them to do. This is very similar to a boss who needs to have a very difficult discussion with their employee. So, how can you have that discussion? What are dynamics you should be considering in those discussions that will help uh, that employee understand what they need to do to turn around and desire to make the changes to turn that around? And those concepts are things that I teach in the interpersonal communication leadership course. And those are concepts that I often say that companies should take down to the very lowest level, all the way down to every employee. Here's some of the principles you need to consider when you're uh, going into a difficult discussion. From an interpersonal communication perspective, for example, on the interpersonal side of the interpersonal communication, you want to take an approach that's empathetic to that person you're trying to convince to do things differently. Standing in a town hall and screaming at somebody, in other words, you have 300 people or maybe 500 people. In some cases, it looks like it's thousands now. And what they're doing, they're simply screaming at the candidate. And there's no dialogue, there's no two-way discussion. So that, by definition, you're not getting into an interpersonal discussion with them. You're having a one-way rant. And you're not coming at it from an empathetic standpoint because you probably haven't been trained or skilled about interpersonal communication. It's not something we teach in high school, and actually you can get out of college without having a lot of training in it. But it is the biggest problem between employee and leaders. It's also the biggest problem between representatives and constituents. They can't communicate effectively. They don't know how. And my guess is many of those representatives, even though they're lawyers, may not have been trained in effective interpersonal communication. They can be charismatic, they can argue well, they can even they can be persuasive, but they don't necessarily know how to actively listen to somebody. There's not a dialogue going between a representative and a constituent where the constituent has a chance to explain everything that's going on, where the representative is just listening to that and actively listening to that, which means you're aligning emotionally with the person, you're feeling what that person's feeling. Those representatives normally come in knowing they're going to hear, knowing what they think they're going to hear, and then they know they're not going to do it, so they're not really actively listening with the intent of change to resolve whatever is difficult about what's going on. Because they know they're going to go back, and the real pressure is not going to be coming from the constituents. It's going to be coming from the oligarchs who are putting the money into their next election. Okay, so those are the dynamics of what's happening here. And this is why there, when you have no other recourse, in other words, you have no legitimate power to fire your representatives. You have no authority to force them to do something that they're not doing. And they are more concerned about what the President of the United States is concerned about than what you're concerned about. Then you've lost that ability. And more importantly, you have elected them, say, for 2 years or 4 years, whatever it is. And you have to wait until that time's over. Then you can speak with your vote again. But what about the time between now and 2006 in some cases, okay? Or 2026, I'm sorry. Uh, you you've got all this stuff going on that is working against you that you don't like, that you have no control over changing. That's where the power of the people, this is where the marches against Tesla is having some impact. It's sending a signal that we're going to make it more painful for you as a representative. The more painful, and to the point where perhaps you may just quit. That is your only recourse, forcing your representative to quit. Then you need to make sure the governor who's going to replace that representative understands this. You're going to have to put the same pressure on that governor to make sure that that governor puts someone that you people want in there. Because right now you could force a senator out, and that governor's going to replace that senator with who they think they ought to be there. Now, if they're having the same scenario, now the one difference is you have a lot of power. You can recall your state representatives. So you can put the pressure on the governor by saying, we're going to put a recall notice against you if you don't put in who we want to have in that office. We'll recall your butt. And therefore, you'll be out of office. And we'll revote somebody back in there who we want in office. Now, so you have that power against your state legislation and your governor. You do not have that power against the federal government. The only people who can take a president out are Congress. And if that president has Congress under their thumb, they're not going to do that. That's what the issue is. You do have the ability to protest and make that congressperson's life so miserable that it's not worth the $160,000 a year that they're getting in that job. But right now, why do people want to stay in Congress forever? My God, who wouldn't? You're protected, unbelievably protected. Unbelievably protected. Nobody can touch you. Nobody can force you to do anything. You can do nothing. You can do nothing for years and still collect $170,000 life insurance, have contacts to people who are oligarchs who will make you filthy rich. Why would you not want to stay in that job forever? So there's a lot more than just their salary in there or their health care benefits. There's that whole contacts with all of that money. That's where the problem is. That's why probably one of the solutions is more active involvement of people when they're electing officials, all the way down to your county and city election officers. You need people in there who are going to represent the vast majority of what your constituency is saying they want to have happen. And you need ways to gather that information from that person. You need to be trained to interview your candidates. You need to be trained to conduct the discussions with them that helps them and force them into coming in and sitting down, not just in a town hall, in a McDonald's with 12 people in various places and all of where they're representing the people, and talk to the people. That's what you want out of those people. You don't want to see what they say on television. You don't want to hear what they say in an hour-long town hall. You want them sitting down with you and telling you and getting a sense of how you feel about things so that they can emotionally connect with you. They can empathetically understand you. And sometimes that requires organizing as constituents and can and taking classes like the ones I do on having difficult discussions, or just generally the whole interpersonal communication. I designed that course for leaders, but the more I think about it, it's something that is valuable to everybody, because you as an employee could influence and interact with your boss in a way that could help them be persuaded to do what you want them to, how you want them to treat you. You could do that if you understood how to manage conflict, how to conduct a difficult discussion, how to build trust between two people through communication. Those are the things I teach. Those are the things you want to go find. Now, you don't have to take my course. You can find that I'm not in this to build a business out of this. I put these things on my channel, my YouTube channel, so other people can go to them and look at them and watch them and sense them. You can buy the books. I have books out there. There's actually a workbook on this course, Interpersonal Communication Leadership course. Everything we cover in that course is in that book. So you could get that book and learn a lot. You won't learn as much as if you took the course, because we're, sharing and talking about it in a group and that kind of stuff. But you would learn a lot more than if you didn't read that damn book. Now I have another one there that says navigating conversations, and it's about how to navigate a conversation, to the things you need to be doing and putting into helping somebody understand where you're coming from, wanting to help you do that. But it also allows you to listen. It teaches you what active listening is about. There's a whole section, a podcast in there on active listening. There's one section on how to interact with people by asking questions, how to ask questions effectively. All that would be very valuable for a constituent who is interacting directly with their representative. But you guys need to force your representatives out into your domain. Don't let them hide behind a camera, or don't let them hide in a town hall meeting where they get grilled for an hour. You want an ongoing, consistent, one-on-one, face-to-face with these people, so they can sense and hear where you're coming from. And that needs to happen with a vast majority of constituents and it's not like they don't have the time. If they're running for office, they're normally doing this over the course of a year, folks. Maybe they should probably start earlier than that. If I were running, I'd be out with you now, knowing it might be 2 years before you would elect me. I would want to be talking with you. I would want to sit down and have coffee on your front porch with you. Kind of understand where you're coming from, what your real needs are. That's what you want in a representative. You want somebody who's going to listen to you and then go in there. And if that president is not doing the right thing, because that's a nationally elected person, that's not elected by you. You may vote, they may have had a majority in your area, but you're not the only one that elected that president. But you are the only ones that elected your representatives. So that relationship should be very personal, not just prior to and during the campaign. That should be a very personal relationship, ongoing the full length of their service. So it's not going to do any good to shorten the service time if we don't improve the quality of the communication with who we have. So how do you improve the relationship between the constituents and the representatives when you have no control over them. You better learn how to communicate with them, to connect with them, which encourages them. So let me just say this. I've in Oklahoma. I sent a letter to Senator Langford. I said, "Let me help you conduct a town hall. Okay, let's get some representatives, enough representatives around the table. Maybe we could. It's hard to do with large groups like this, but it can be done if you have groups of, say, 10 tables in a room with 10 people. That's 100 people. That's a pretty good representative cross section of your group. And in fact, everybody else could watch us on YouTube live and could input on chat while these groups interacted in a session where we identified, and it could be facilitated like someone like myself, where we identify all of the key issues we want these representatives to do. This is in writing, it's on the ball, it's on the wall, it's on flip charts, wherever. And then we begin to press those. We begin to address each of those issues, and we prioritize them. And in terms of importance and impact, okay? That's just an example of how you can conduct a town hall. Where I'm facilitating this, the representative is there, and their representative staff should be there taking notes. And we're conducting this, and we're bringing this down to a basically action plan that we would like this representative to go do. It's clear, it's written in there, it's as good as there. We could then take that, he could then take that and spend some time going to either more town halls and bringing a few more people in, and then consolidating that, organizing it, prioritizing it, and bringing it into a form that makes sense for him to go back and could present all of this information during his congressional sessions, the committee meetings. Here's what my people think. I'm not telling you. This is what people are telling me. Have any of you guys done this? Think of the power that committee would have if they had that much information out of every representative who conducted town hall. Now, when you walk away from that town hall, you don't have somebody who's been yelled at for 15 minutes. Okay, you have actually had people, your constituents, define the issues they feel are critical, prioritize those issues in an organized way, and communicate them to you effectively through a consultant to help you understand, go do this. This is what we have. It's a lot of information. So if somebody starts going off the rail, you have a lot more information to go to your governor with if you want to replace that person down the road. You can go to your governor with a lot of information. Basically, a performance review. The person has a bona fide job description from you. They have all their steps that they need to do. You can conduct a performance review on that person through the mail. You can conduct an ongoing performance review. That's a lot of pressure on a senator or congressperson. If none of that works, if they've just basically been sucked into what I call a cult mental attitude, then your pressure is going to have to be, we have to put so much pressure on this person in any way we can that will make them more fearful of us than the oligarchs and that president. And that normally comes down to protesting, spending days, nights, and weeks following them everywhere they go, making their life miserable. I mean, we've seen that work in some instances where people just finally say, this is not worth it, I quit. That's your only recourse. That's a bad way to handle it. Let's get back into maybe the recommendation I had about how to conduct a town hall. Okay, and you could have uh, I mean that could be a smaller group of people. You could have your constituents all decide who they want, and everybody could input to them, and then you could have that discussion, facilitated discussion, and come up with the right information for that representative to do. That gives them a lot of, that gives them a lot of clout to go back, a lot of evidence, if you will. Gives them agency. In other words, for them to go back and present to other people and say, and this is what my folks are saying. You guys have anything like this? That would be a hell of a thing to be able to have in your pocket as a representative, congressman or senator, congressperson or senator, sorry. So, what I'm saying to you is this: you don't have the authority to fire your people. You have virtually no authority to get rid of the person you put in office, federal office. You have that at state. You can do a recall at state. But you can't recall, you can't fire them, you can't impeach them. They're there for 2 years. They know that. They know that. So you perhaps addressing it from a more ineffective communication way might convince them that you want to help them. You don't want to harm them, so to speak, in their process. But if they're not open to that, then your only other reaction is to make them more fearful of you than of the oligarchs and the president. And that's a really difficult and uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous route to go down. A better route would be first try the communication approach that I mentioned. I'll leave a description where you can buy those books, and in the description I'll leave a link where you can buy those books. You're certainly anybody who's interested in learning how to do this, maybe as a group. You can reach me. First, I have a thing on my website called Events Calendar, and in there you can schedule a first free conversation with me for an hour. Sometimes they go a little longer than an hour, but if there's something I can do to help you guys come together and maybe take an approach that's less controversial and more impactful through more effective communication, gosh, I'm here. Okay. Uh, just consider some of what I've said. You have a great day.